faces and also the new ones, the faces of the ones who are the most reliable. Just a short introduction before we start. So today's meeting will be dedicated to the Ukrainian issue, which still is one of the hottest international ones. I will highlight some latest developments in this question, Ambassador, then will provide profound insight in the situation on the whole. Your questions, including the tricky ones, are as usual welcome, so don't hesitate. Then we move outside to launch altogether the exhibition Mariupol 2022-2025, which vividly depicts how the Russian state is restoring the liberated cities, which are returned to where they belong. Afterwards, a small buffet is at your disposal. So, well, as you know, the peace talks on Ukraine are still on the agenda. However, not all the international actors are interested in this process and even undermine it. The Council of Europe, for instance, is still developing pseudo-legal instruments to hold Russia accountable, I put that in commas, for conducting the special military operation. This includes the so-called compensation mechanism aimed at confiscating the frozen Russian sovereign assets in Europe, namely in Europe, which is used for the benefits of the Kiev regime. Then register of damage caused by the Russian Federation's aggression against Ukraine. It was established in May 2023. And now the compensation mechanism is to include a so-called claims commission for Ukraine. To determine the parameters of this institution, experts from over 50 countries held a series of meetings in The Hague, Netherlands in 2024-2025. The meetings were organized by the Register of Damage, it's an entity, it's an organization, Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands and Ukraine, and the Office of the President of Ukraine. Frankly speaking, it raises questions and eyebrows how they're going to implement these initiatives, only if their nuclear power loses, but we all know that it's not possible. So as for Ukraine itself, the situation in this country, which is governed by the criminal neo-Nazi gang, is seriously deteriorating. Repressions targeting the Russian-speaking population in Ukraine have recently escalated through the new law on national memory. It's called the Law on the Fundamentals of State Policy of National Memory of the Ukrainian People. You can see it in your leaflets. It was adopted by the Verkhovna Rada, Ukrainian Parliament, on August 21, and is built on a state-endorsed neo-Nazi ideology. It presents Ukrainian identity as shaped by struggles against foreign domination in the 20th century and by the war for independence, again in commas, against Russian aggression, starting February 19, 2014. Under the new framework, any attempt to question the narratives promoted by nationalist groups is classified by the Ukrainian regime as spreading false information about the history of Ukraine and equated with anti-Ukrainian propaganda. The historical radicals entrenched in Kiev openly aim to destroy tens of thousands of monuments to Soviet soldiers, fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers who protected the Ukrainian soil. Under the new law, even symbols like the St. George ribbon, battle flags, Soviet state awards, and even the term Great Patriotic War are strictly prohibited at memorial sites, including soldiers' graves. The most outrageous parts of the law, which lay bare both its hostility to Russia and the Nazi essence of today's Kiev authorities, include the glorification of the so-called fighters for Ukraine's independence in the 20th century and heroes of the nation. It's clear who is meant. It's Shushkevich, Konovalets, Bandera, and other Nazi collaborators and betrayers of their own people. Even more grotesque is the enshrined provision that elevates the orders and medals of Petlura's Ukrainian People's Republic to the same rank as state decorations, despite the fact that Petlura was the mastermind of their devastating, bloody, anti-Jewish pogroms in the beginning of the last century, in which 50,000 people were murdered in a very severe manner. The Russian side proceeds from understanding that law on the fundamentals of state policy of national memory of the Ukrainian people confirms the extremist nature of the Kiev regime, which came to power as a result, I remind you, of military coup d'etat in 2014. The legislation demonstrates the resolve of current Ukrainian authorities to relegate everything Russian or related to the Russian culture and historical heritage. The law contradicts, by the way, the Constitution of Ukraine and its national obligations. Namely, it violates the UN General Assembly resolution combating qualifications of Nazism, neo-Nazism, and other practices that contribute to fueling contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. The embassy and the Russian state would like to emphasize that such steps are aimed at sabotaging peace-building efforts of Russia and the United States, including the results of the summit in Anchorage.
I will just very brief you about current situation around Ukrainian conflict. And just once again, we would like to confirm our readiness to start negotiations. Even my President Putin, is ready to meet with the ex-president of the Ukraine, Zelensky. We don't accept his legitimacy. But anyway, my president is ready to meet with him. But we also appreciate the policy of the current American administration, led by President Trump, because unlike previous administration, Democratic Party administration, they are ready to listen to us, to understand our concerns and the reasons which forced us to start special military operation in the Ukraine. We have repeated many times, what were the reasons of our decision. If it's necessary, we can repeat. Also, you know quite well our demands. These are very clear. Once again, Ukraine will never join NATO. Never. Whether Western countries want it or they don't want it. We will decide. They must have neutral status. We don't want to see military infrastructure of NATO close to our borders. Russian language, Russian people, Russian Orthodox Church, they shouldn't be deprived from the possibility to have their legitimate rights in the Ukraine. And the new 4 regions of the Russian Federation, Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson, are part of the Russian Federation, including Crimea as well, according to the Constitution of the Russian Federation. These are our main demands. And these are the goals which are set by President Putin. And we will continue our special military operation. Once again, we are ready for peaceful talks, but at the moment being, some of the European countries are main spoilers. They want to derail this peace process and want to push American administration to join them, unfortunately. But we do believe that President Trump will continue its constructive role in this conflict. The main spoilers are United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Poland. These 4 countries, including Baltic states. They want to inflict strategic defeat to the Russian Federation. Once again, it's impossible. We are strong enough to defeat this fascist regime in the Ukraine. And just, it's very clear. We often listen from European countries, and not only, the slogan, we will support Ukraine as long as it's necessary. We have already heard such assurances from Western countries just regarding former puppet regime in Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani. They used to say we will support the regime in Kabul as long as it's necessary. And what happened in August 2021? We remember disgraceful defeat of NATO forces in Afghanistan from Taliban. Disgraceful defeat. As long as possible, as long as necessary. Now the same. Of course, they want to use Ukraine as a leverage against my country, because they don't like to see Russia as independent and sovereign country. But all their efforts are useless. Once again, we will defeat the puppet regime in the Ukraine and its foreign sponsors. But at the same time, we are ready for peaceful talks, not ceasefire, because we were just ready to discuss the issue. Minsk Agreement in 2014, Istanbul Agreements in 2022, and we were deceived many times by our so-called Western partners. We were deceived many times. So we need guarantees, strong reliable guarantees. That's the case. So, if you have questions, any questions, I'm ready to, together with my colleagues, to answer. But once again, I would like to repeat that we highly appreciate, once again, President Trump's initiatives and also his meeting with President Putin in Alaska a month ago. We also highly appreciate the peace initiatives of our friends from Chinese People's Republic, from South Africa, from Brazil. We also, I just would like to use this possibility to express my gratitude to the government of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka for its traditional neutral policy during voting on different international organizations. Your delegation, as usual, you are abstaining during voting. We highly appreciate it. We do believe that this, let's say, balanced policy will continue, despite the pressure. Because we know we don't put pressure. We only kindly request. And at the same time, the Russian Federation, unlike Western countries, we don't interfere into domestic affairs of legitimate and sovereign countries. We don't lecture Sri Lanka or any other countries what to do in their domestic policy. My message to Western countries is please focus on your domestic problems. You have a lot of domestic problems in your own countries. In UK, you just were watching huge demonstrations in UK, huge demonstrations in France. Today, general strike, economic situation in Germany. Once again, don't intervene into our domestic affairs. Focus on your own problems and settle down your own problems first of all and take care of your taxpayers. Thank you. Please. Yeah, you know, once again, of course we don't know the details, but my president was very satisfied by the outcomes of this meeting in Anchorage. I do believe that such context between our presidents, between high-ranking officials from both countries will continue. And my president, my foreign minister, Mr. Lavrov, as far as I know, he will be visiting New York to participate in the United Nations General Assembly, and maybe he will have some contacts. I don't know. Usually he has. And so it will be a good possibility to continue exchange of views, because, you know, it's very difficult. Even President Trump has confessed that it was very difficult to settle down the problem in Ukraine, because initially, before he returned to power, he thought it would be very easy, but now he understands it's a very complicated case. We need a lot of time. And once again, we must just overcome the obstacles created by leading European countries, including Brussels. Negative role of Ursula von der Leyen. First of all, one of the main spoilers is Brussels, and not in the national capacity, but European Union.
Now, one question that is about in the wake of this US tariffs on Sri Lanka and all. What are the opportunities for Sri Lanka and Russia to enhance bilateral?
Tariffs against Sri Lanka, you know, it's your bilateral issue, because as I told you, I don't want to intervene into domestic affairs, and I don't want to have comments on your relations with other countries. But of course, I hope that you will be able to settle down the problem as soon as possible, because in our case, de facto no trade, no tariffs with the Russian Federation. And just they are threatening to impose more sanctions against us. Just as they have adopted so far 18 packages of sanctions against the Russian Federation. And do you remember their promises to tear up Russian economy? And von der Leyen was predicting that the Russians will use some chips from their war machines, or I mean washing machines, or just, do you remember? And what happened? Any serious negative impact on our economy? They have damaged their economy themselves. Now they're thinking about 19th package of anti-Russian sanctions, targeting mainly against India and China, Chinese People's Republic. But it's very fun, you know. How can they put pressure on such great countries like China, Chinese People's Republic, and India? Of course, it's a lose-lose game, lose-lose game. And also these tariffs, I think it's contrary to the WTO regulations. If you are a member of international organization, you would be strictly committed to its provisions. It's the only way. But I know that the negotiations are underway, and hopefully you will we will be able to settle down the problem. We expect also very severe steps from the European Union in terms of Israel. It's also very important, you know. Russian Federation, Russian sportsmen were deprived from the possibility to participate in international, competitions because of aggression and so on. And now Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said that Israeli sportsmen must also be deprived from this possibility to participate. But International Olympic Committee says no, it's different. It's different, so it's politically motivated decision. By the way, I would like to remind you that in the conflict, we expected that the United Nations organization will pursue independent and neutral policy. But unfortunately, its policy is completely pro-Western. And my minister, Sergei Lavrov, yesterday sharply criticized United Nations organization's policy, and personally, Mr. Guterres, Antonio Guterres, and he said that, of course, we understand that Secretariat of the United Nations Organization, Secretary General, are representatives of Western countries. And they push forward Western agenda. They always try to protect Ukrainians, their crimes committed against the Russian Federation, and unilaterally blame only Russians for that. That's why our demand is, please, put an end to the policy of double standards and hypocrisy. Once again, my minister yesterday sharply criticized the United Nations Organization Secretariat and personally Mr. Antonio Guterres. Because look, mainly composition of the United Nations Secretariat, representatives of Western countries. There is a lady, his deputy from Nigeria, Amina Mohammed, but she also is a British citizen as well. She has 2 passports. Once again, they must be just to pursue balanced policy. It's very important for high-ranking officials from any international organization, not only United Nations, but also OSCE and some other organizations. My colleague has already mentioned Council of Europe, but it's a totally pro-Western country organization. Any other questions? We strongly condemn any provocation against Venezuela. We understand what are the reasons behind. Venezuela is very rich of oil and gas. Let me put parallels between U.S. invasion to Iraq in 2003. Yeah. This invasion took place without UN approval. Even France and Germany at that time were against. It was an aggression, and Saddam Hussein was kicked out from his power. He was executed. And they wanted to establish their control in Iraq. It was a blatant violation of international law. They were blaming Russia, and they forget about their invasion to Iraq by George Bush administration. That's why we stand with Venezuela. We condemn any aggressive plans against this country, both from the United States or from other Latin American countries, neighboring ones. One of these countries is Colombia. And some people from Colombia are fighting have joined Ukrainian troops and are fighting against us, by the way.
I have 2 questions. One is there any progress about this proposed nuclear power plant in Sri Lanka? Nuclear power plant. Is there any progress? And the second one is about the same thing.
About what? Let me ask first question. We have some ideas, some proposals, and frankly speaking, I asked for a meeting with the representatives of this nuclear center board. Atomic board. We have something to discuss, but I don't want to go into details. But once again, any decision is your sovereign ones. We don't want to impose anything from our side. It's your decision, it's your legitimate right to decide whether to accept it or not. Please.
And second one is about your cancer vaccine. And is it currently available in Sri Lanka or what is it?
It's just the research work is still underway in Moscow. We are conducting very serious work, and we have already asked our Ministry of Health about it, and as soon as we get any information, we will inform inform our friends and our partners about it. We feel that there is a great interest to this vaccine, cancer vaccine, and we are working on it. Just also we try to establish close contacts between Ministry of Health of the Russian Federation and Ministry of Health of Sri Lanka. It's also very important. We are working on it as well. Sure. No questions? Everything is clear for you, I think. Yeah, thank you.